right, ladies and gentlemen, today we are making yet another NFL tier list as we lead up to the regular season. Last Tuesday, we ranked every single offense in the NFL. Today, we are doing every single defense in the NFL. And listen, man, same categories as last week, S, A, B, C, D, F. It is pretty self-explanatory. Let us start with the F tier of defense. And where else could we start but the Cincinnati Bengals, man? This was the worst defense in football last year, in my opinion. And I know that the Trey Hendrickson deal got done. It's a one-year deal. They're bringing him back. He had drafted Shamar Stewart. He's getting ready to go. You signed Oren Burks in free agency. This, in my estimation, is still going to be a pretty dog water defense. It has a great player on it in Trey Hendrickson. Don't get me wrong, but at the end of the day, I do think it's still going to be a very, very subpar defensive unit. As I look around the rest of the NFL, the Falcons, man, the Falcons, maybe I'm an asshole for putting them in this tier because they did draft Jalen Walker and James Pierce Jr., but I don't know, man. It's an awful lot of projecting to say that those guys will work out. And if they don't, this team will literally have the worst pass rush in football. It'll be that bad. So for that, for having the possibility of having the worst pass rush in football, I do have to put the Falcons in this tier. And I think in the subject of being fair, I got to put the Panthers in this tier as well, man. I do think with Derek Brown healthy, they will be better, but you were able to run the ball all over this football team last year. And I don't see why that changes this season. We'll see. We'll see how much Derek Brown truly matters to this team, but that's going to be a bad sight to see. And then the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jacksonville Jaguars are going to compete with the Cincinnati Bengals for the worst defense in football. They did draft Travis Hunter, and they do at least have some version of a pass rush, but this defense was really, really terrible last year. And they brought in Jordan Lewis, which I did actually like. And they did obviously draft Travis Hunter, but what percentage of snaps does he really play for this defense? I'm not sure. I just don't think that they've shored up enough on the defensive side of the ball to move out of this tier. We move into the D tier now at this point in time. And the D tier is an interesting one because, there's a lot of defenses you look at around the NFL and you wonder what kind of jump can these guys make. I'm going to put the Raiders in this tier. I do think Max Crosby obviously is a big reason that they are elevated as well. The defensive mind and Pete Carroll and certain pieces that they have, I do think he can elevate. I did really enjoy the fact that they brought in Jeremy Chin to this team, but they are still a D tier defense for me. Again, Max Crosby, Jeremy Chin, and Pete Carroll really carry them up to that level for me. It's tough because there's a lot of C tier defenses when I look at this list, and I try and give you guys my raw, honest opinion here. Oh man, Washington falls into this tier for me, man. Washington, their defense, I think, could be what causes them to miss the playoffs. And I know picking Washington to miss the playoffs is pretty hot takey, but the defensive line isn't great. They spent money on Javon Kinlaw, which I don't think is ever smart. You look at the secondary, I do like Sandra still, but Lattimore's probably not going to give you a full season. Their best defensive player, it's Bobby Wagner, who is an absolute beast, but age is like eventually got to start catching up with that guy, right? So we'll see in that point in time. Man, is anybody else in this D tier? I'm going to put the Cowboys in this D tier, mainly because we don't know what's going on with Micah Parsons at this point in time. And even if Micah officially gets paid by the time he's caught up to speed, I just don't see him being the Micah Parsons that we've known him to be. I'd imagine he's going to start off slow. He hasn't been in training camp. He's probably not in the closest to football shape. And outside of him, you lose DeMarcus Lawrence. Trayvon Diggs looks like he's going to be healthy to start the season, but we'll see. And aside from that, this just isn't the Cowboys defense that it was a couple of years ago when I thought that they could have gone on a Super Bowl run, man. I think I'm going to leave it at that. No, maybe we got to be mean. Do we got to be mean? I'm going to throw the Titans in here as well. The Titans statistically were actually not a bad defense last year, but when I look at them on paper, and I think that they have the potential to be in games where there's a little bit more pressure on opposing teams, I do think other teams could put their foot on the gas longer against them. And do better. Like, think about the field position that Will Levis was giving opposing teams last year. I think a lot of that contributed to why the Titans defense just didn't give up so many yards. I do like Jeffrey Simmons. I do like Devondre Sweat. We'll see if L'Jarius Sneed could have a bounce back year. But listen, for the aesthetic of the tier list, having 4 in each tier to start, we had to put somebody else in here, and it's going to be the Titans. Next, into the C tier, I think there's a lot of C tier level defenses in football. The New Orleans Saints, to me, are a C tier level. I question just how much this defense can hold up throughout the course of a season. I wouldn't be surprised if they opened the year at like a B or an A, but finished the year at a C or a D, just based on the age of, Cam Jordan, Demario Davis. They are an older group of guys. I really have some question marks about the cornerback position after moving on from Paulson and Debo. Kool-Aid McKinstry, can he take that leap for this team? We'll see. They do have Chase Young, but again, a guy that gets hurt a lot. I'm also going to put the Dolphins in this tier. I think maybe I'm a little low on them as a C tier because their front four is actually pretty sweet with Jalen Phillips, Bradley Chubb, Chop Robinson. But the odds of those guys staying healthy and playing together is a big, big question mark for me. I like the fact that they have Minka Fitzpatrick back in that secondary, but their corners are atrocious. It could be the worst cornerback room in football. And for that, I don't think you can go any higher than a C tier personally. As we progress down the line here, I'm going to put the Niners in this tier. I think that the Niners are actually elevated to this tier by a couple star players in coaching, Fred Warner, Nick Bosa, and Robert Saleh. I believe those guys can make enough of an impact to where, as long as all 3 of them are there, the rest of the defense can fall in line. I also like Mustafa, their safety. Diamador Lenore is not a bad corner. I don't love him as CB1, but he's not a bad corner per se. I'm going to put the Patriots in this tier. The one thing that's lacking for New England is a real pass rush for me. We'll see what Milton Williams' presence can be. And Harold Landry, I guess, is a free agent. But the secondary of Gonzalez, Carlton Davis, the safety duo that they have, Jabril Peppers is out there, Robert Spillane they brought in. So I think it's a solid defense, but they are really missing a key edge rusher for me to be like fully bought into that defense per se. Um, Another C. I'm gonna put the Browns here mainly because of their health concerns right now. JOK isn't healthy in the middle of that defense. We'll see what Spellinger does. Jordan Hicks retired from this defense as well. You do have Myles Garrett on the defensive line, obviously, and Denzel Ward, and those are great pieces. But this tier feels like either you don't have a star player or you only have a couple star players. Oh, man. This is where the going gets tough. I think that's it for the C tier. I think that's it. Moving on to the B tier, I'm starting to quickly realize like there are some pretty decently built NFL defenses. I'm going to put the Rams in this tier. I do like Jared Verse and Braden Fisk on the defensive line. I love the Poona Ford edition. It's just the youngness and the can they do it again of their back 7 that I have questions about with Kitchens and Curl and their cornerback position. But I'll tell you what, man, if the Rams secondary can perform the way it did the last 4 to 6 weeks of last year, they could certainly be an A tier defense. It's just kind of one of those things where I want to see it again to believe it. I got the Buccaneers as a B tier defense. They have some really nice pieces all around the defense. Kalijah Cansey, Vita Vea, Levante David, Antoine Winfield. I don't love their corners, and I do question again what kind of a pass rush they can truly generate, which is, once we're at this B tier, you have to have some elite players at every level, I feel, or just be really solid at every level. And the Buccaneers are just decent. You know what I mean? I'm hoping you're picking up what I'm putting down when I say it that way. The Chicago Bears are in this tier too, man. Montez Sweat, Jalen Johnson, and a defense that was actually pretty solid last year, a little underrated even. The Green Bay Packers in this tier, they're just all around a bunch of solid guys. The only thing is they generated a lot of production from turnovers last year, and I just don't know if that's something that truly could be sustained year to year. Xavier McKinney absolutely balled out, but is that who Xavier McKinney truly is, or does he kind of come back to what we saw he was with the New York Giants? You move on from Jair Alexander to Nate Hobbs, which, again, I get it, the best ability is availability, but in terms of your ceiling as a defense, I think that lowered that. The Cardinals in this spot, man, I think the Cardinals are one of the more slept-on defenses in football. They bring in Josh Sweat. Jonathan Gannon's building up his defensive line there. Will Johnson in the second round, I think, is going to be a steal. You have a guy like Budda Baker and just a lot of young talent there that Jonathan Gannon is absolutely developing at a high level. I got the Kansas City Chiefs in this tier as well. Karlaftis and Chris Jones, Nick Bolton, Trent McDuffie, really, really solid pieces. You lose Justin Reed, the safety, so I wonder if we see potentially Kansas City get beat for a couple more big plays this year. And obviously, we saw their defense in their playoff run in Super Bowl wasn't quite what it once was. I got the Chargers in this tier too, man. I was a lot higher on the Chargers when this offseason kind of opened up, and I'm kind of cooling on them just a tad bit here. There's just a lot of moving parts on this defensive side. I question how the interior D line is going to hold up without Puna Ford. Are you going to be able to run all over this team? And it's just a lot of young guys they're depending on, similar to the Rams. I got the Jets in this tier, man. Sauce Gardner got paid. Will he go back to what he once was? They bring in Brandon Stevens to play alongside him now. You have Quinnen and Quincy Williams, obviously. And, you bring in Aaron Glenn. I think he's going to get this defense playing some good football. And then lastly, for this B tier, man, is the Indianapolis Colts. Again, a more slept on defense. Latu, Kwity Paye, DeForest Buckner on that front defensive line. Kenny Moore leading that cornerback room. You bring in Cam Bynum from the Minnesota Vikings. Like, this is a good core, and you move Lou Anarumo over here from Cincinnati, and you give Anarumo some talent to work with. We've seen him, though. The 1 year that Cincinnati had Burrow, Higgins, Chase, and a defensive roster with talent. Anarumo was the defensive play caller there. Went into Kansas City and did a really good job against Patrick Mahomes and helped get Cincinnati to the Super Bowl, man. So Lou Anarumo can coach up defense. We move into the A tier now, and again, we're really splitting hairs between the A tier and the S tier. I'm going to, in fact, put the New York Giants in the A tier. The New York Giants, I think it might be my favorite defensive line in football. Kayvon Thibodeau, Dexter Lawrence, Brian Burns, and Abdul Carter is just going to be an absolute nightmare. You have Bobby Okereke at the linebacker position. You brought in Paulson Adebo. You brought in Javon Holland. You still have some young pieces that you're developing in that secondary. I think the Giants are going to be in a lot of football games this year off the basis of their defense. I don't know if it's going to be a lot of fun football games this year, but I expect the Giants to be in some 17-13 games that are down to the wire simply because their defense and their pass rush is just so elite. I got the Detroit Lions in this tier. I do think that we kind of forgot how good the Lions defense was because of a lot of the injuries that they had, and a lot of pressure was on Aaron Glenn to schematically get the defense to show up. But Aiden Hutchinson looked like the best edge rusher in football last year before he got hurt. You still have Brian Branch, Jack Campbell, Kirby Joseph. Branch and Joseph, you could argue that's the best safety duo in football. I'm a little skeptical of the cornerback position, mostly because I just have some skepticism on Terry and Arnold, a little bit too penalized for my liking, but I do love DJ Reed as a cornerback too. If they can get a successful pass rush next to Hutchinson, whether that comes from Davenport or McNeil, this could be a really scary defensive unit. I, of course, got Buffalo in this tier. Buffalo has just been a consistently great defense year after year, and it's not the flashiest of names, but it is a complete defensive unit year after year. And I think the biggest MVP is Sean McDermott. Obviously, like, you have guys, Greg Rousseau, Ed Oliver, Matt Milano, Teron Johnson, like guys on that defensive side of the ball that obviously do step up and make plays. But McDermott's always leading a strong defense in Buffalo. Seattle Seahawks, I thought about putting them in S tier. They were really, really close. If I had to, it would look something like that. But man, this is a sneaky, scary defensive unit, and I think their defense could lead them to more wins than even I originally projected for them. DeMarcus Lawrence, Leonard Williams. I love Ernest Jones in the linebacker spot, in their secondary, man. Witherspoon, Tariq Woolen. In a couple of years, we could seriously be talking about that as the best cornerback duo in football. They are really, really sharp. Mike McDonald has coached up this defense since the moment he got there, and if that offense can hit this year, Seattle could certainly be a scary playoff team. And then we get to the S tier, man. It's all the teams left. The Baltimore Ravens. I think on paper, you could certainly make a case that Baltimore is the best defense in football. On the defensive line, Matabuke, they drafted Mike Green in the second round, who's an absolute stud. Roquan Smith's a top 2 linebacker in football. Jair Alexander, Marlon Humphrey, Nate Wiggins, Kyle Hamilton, Malachi Starks. Like, it's just a fucking loaded defense. The Broncos, who were the best defense last year, they led the NFL in sacks with that defensive line with guys like Zach Allen, Nick Bonito holding it down. Defensive Player of the Year, Patrick Surtain. You bring in Dre Greenlaw and Hufanga. You draft Jahdae Barron, who's going to be a top 10 nickel in football already. I absolutely love it. The Minnesota Vikings, a lot of coaching here with Brian Flores. And, you could argue the Vikings as an A-tier team potentially. I think I'm actually going to move them down. I'm going to move the Vikings to A tier just because I have some question marks about the cornerback spot and without the safety Cam Bynum back there now. But their defensive front, Dallas Turner, Jonathan Allen, Andrew Van Ginkel, Javon Hargrave, Jonathan Grenard, like that is a loaded front. Fire zone blitzes from Brian Flores aren't going away. Philadelphia Eagles, I have some question marks about the cornerback 2 spot. I do, but you can't deny the talent on this roster. They just turn over defensive line like an absolute machine. Jalen Carter is still going to be a beast. Nolan Smith, Jordan Davis. You have all pro linebacker Zach Bond, Quinyon Mitchell, and Cooper DeJean holding it down. You still have Reed Blankenship. Makuba looks like a hit out of the second round. So the Eagles defense is young, but I expect it to be good. Maybe not as good as it was last year, but still one of the better defenses in football. Pennsylvania just kind of getting known for that. TJ Watt over there leading that Pittsburgh Steelers defense. Their defensive line is just super, super deep. Cam Hayward, Herbig. You got Patrick Queen at the linebacker spot, Jalen Ramsey, Joey Porter, Darius Slay. Like, what a cornerback room. Mike Tomlin always leading a strong defense. And then lastly, in this S tier, man, the Houston Texans. You guys that have been watching the channel for a minute know that I think the Texans could be the best defense in football, and I think it could really be what catapults this team into being in that tier 1 of AFC teams this year, because I do think they could have the strongest defense, even stronger than Baltimore. I think it's possible. Will Anderson Jr. is my defensive player of the year. You pair him with Danielle Hunter, 2 top 40 talents in the NFL in just terms of players. Derek Stingley's a top 2 cornerback in football. You have Caden Bullock. You have Amari Lassiter, you have CJ Gardner-Johnson, you have Jalen Petrie, you have a stacked linebacker room. D'Amico Ryan's leading the way. This is a very, very, very strong defensive unit. So, as I mentioned, last week we did offense. This week we did defense. Next week will be my official week 1 power rankings. So, when you guys are seeing this, we are officially 8-9 days away from football season. I cannot wait. I will catch you next time.